Well, jeepers! You're listening to Smash or Pass with JayBee, Milly, and Smash.
Hi everyone, welcome to another video on the JayBee
Hello.
and Milly channel. Today, as always, we are joined by Smash.
Hello.
And Rihanna.
Hi.
So we're also really excited today to be speaking with Craig Tilley.
Ruh-roh.
Now, there are so many reasons that we're really excited about this interview. There's so many, movies and series that you've worked on that we are just in love with, quite honestly. And also on a kind of Scooby note, this year is the 20th anniversary of the 2002 movie. And I know you wrote, the proposed first script and also worked on the story for the movie as well. So there's some things that we're really excited to be speaking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just an incredible honor as well, because just looking at your background there, I can just think about, like, you've pretty much got like my childhood in the background right there. So that's absolutely
Yeah, I want to move
incredible.
my head like this for our poster as well.
I miss my childhood, especially when you tell me that Scooby is 20 years old now. I feel really old. Oh man.
No, it
Doesn't
doesn't.
feel like that long.
It really, I mean, when I first saw it, it doesn't feel like that long some days. And other days it feels like a little bit longer, but it's really good to be speaking with you today. And I guess on that note, my first question for you is that looking at your career history, I can see that a lot of your earlier work is as a production assistant, as an assistant, and then later on as that progressed, you've got a lot more writing credits and producing credits. And I wanted to ask, was that always part of your plan in terms of career progression?
Yeah. I mean, I came out here to LA to pursue what I thought would be just producing, but it turned into writing. It took me a while not to feel like a fraud as a writer. But when I moved out here, you just sort of start getting any job you get. And I did PA work on some films. And then I was Joe Dante's assistant for a couple years, which is where I really learned about screenwriting, because he'd get submitted so many scripts for him to direct or produce, and he would have me read those and do coverage. And I had these ideas for movies, and I'm like, well, I should just try writing one. And so I wrote my first script. It was kind of like a Goonies meets Legend of Sleepy Hollow thing, which never sold, but it got me some notoriety in town. And I got hired to write a movie for Fox. It came across Chris Columbus's desk. He liked it, offered me this movie to write, and then based on that, offered me a 2-picture deal, one of which was Cheaper by the Dozen. And in between those, I wrote Scooby Doo. Because I remember him calling me when he was attached to a Fantastic Four movie back in the day. He's like, do you want to write Fantastic Four? I'm like, I just signed up to do Scooby Doo. He's like, well, do Fantastic Four. I'm like, but I want to do Scooby Doo. It's a dream. So that's how far back that goes. And then I wrote features. I kind of got pigeonholed in the family film genre, which I don't mind, but I like Marvel kind of stuff. And I wrote a script that changed I was hired by New Line and Sam Raimi to do this giant 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea movie, sort of in the tone of Pirates of the Caribbean. It never got made, but people around town read that like, oh, this guy does more than just family films. So then all of a sudden I'm working on the Clone Wars, I'm working on Marvel, I'm doing other big movies. So that script changed my trajectory. And it's like I always tell young writers, don't be heartbroken if something doesn't sell, because this probably did more for my career by not selling than if it sold. It's like the gift that keeps on giving. So that's how I kind of ended up where I am now, doing TV and features and producing and writing.
That's amazing. And you've already mentioned so many projects that we all, really, really adore. Like, so I want to say the Cheaper by the Dozen movies is some of my most rewatched movies when I was younger. They were amazing, and I was just like the amount of nostalgia we all have for them as well.
Mm-hmm.
I was just wondering what it was like to work on those movies.
No, it was great. I mean, that was the one where I had my 2-picture deal with Chris, who produced it, right? And I'm like, well, what am I going to write? And they gave me a list of all the properties that Fox owned, because they had done Cheaper by a Dozen movie back in the 50s. And I wanted something challenging. So I went through this list like, oh, Cheaper by the Dozen. That sounds like a challenge. 12 kids, 2 characters, all this stuff. So I run down to his office and like, hey, what about Cheaper by the Dozen? He's like, well, how would we do this? I'm like, I don't know, just updated and funnier. I love it. Call the exec at Fox. Oh, a Cheaper by the Dozen movie. What would you do? Updated and funnier. I love it. Go do it. And I'm like, I have no idea how to do this. It was like the craziest pitch ever. But then I whittled away, figured it out. It went through some changes with other writers, but it's still heart and soul my movie. And FedEx is me, looks like me as a kid. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with it overall.
Awesome.
Now they're doing a new one. It comes out in
Yeah, I
March.
just saw that actually.
Yeah, my name will be on it, but it's more of a contractual thing because I created the original show. So I'm curious to see it. I did read the script. Pretty interesting. See what people think. I liked it.
Nice. I mean, I know I'll be at least giving it a try, but yours will always be our childhoods.
Thank you.
So on the writer side of things, you know, I mean, I kind of assume you have somewhat of like an idea of how you're gonna, you know, you see it in your head and how you would like the product to kind of look like and whatever. But have you ever been able to have any input on like casting wise, or who portrays certain characters, or even maybe like setting places where they film?
Yeah, in TV, like the difference between television, when you're a feature, you write the script and then they're like, okay, go away now. and,
okay.
And the director takes charge. Mostly, it's a little different on Percy Jackson because I just had the relationship with Chris and his producers, so I get to hang out on set and do some on-the-fly rewrites and stuff like that. So a little more involved. But normally in features, and by the time they make it, even if they did want you, you're already on to other projects and you can't, which is what happened with Scooby. But in TV, the writer is king. You're sort of in charge of everything. You're involved in casting, you're involved in who directs, you're involved in the final cut. So yeah, on S.H.I.E.L.D. was great because it was just such a fun show because we have so many tones. We first of all, a great cast, but we could do comedy and romance and sci-fi and horror and action and adventure, and we just never got bored. It was like so much fun. But yeah, and we would, the way it worked on S.H.I.E.L.D., we'd produce our own episodes. So if I wrote something, I was involved every step of the way, pre-production, casting, post-production, and then the rest of the time just in the writer's room, generating story, and figuring out plot, which is not always easy, especially on a show this big that has to tie into Marvel stuff. It was like a crazy jigsaw puzzle a lot of times.
That's amazing. And, you know, I think it's safe to say all of us have watched Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and it's one of our favorite TV shows to watch, aside from Scooby, of course. And I guess the next question is, what really appeals you to writing screenplays?
You know, I just grew up on movies and television. I just always wanted to do it. Yeah, and you know, Scooby Doo, I go back, like there used to be a thing called Saturday morning cartoons in America, which doesn't exist anymore, but that's the only time you got to see cartoons. And my mom, bless her, would wake me up at 7 every Saturday. I'd go pour my Cap'n Crunch, my juice. I'd sit in front of TV, watching all the greats, and Scooby Doo I never missed. I mean, I got to see not quite the original one because this is like the 70s. But I loved all the versions of Scooby Doo. It was my favorite show. And I'm kind of segueing now to Scooby Doo. Is that okay? About how that came about. So I just loved Scooby Doo, loved everything about it. And when my career started taking off here, I had a manager who's like, what's your dream project? I'm like, I'd like to do a live action Scooby Doo movie. He's like, are you serious? That's crazy. I'm like, because nobody was thinking about this back in the day. It's like mid-90s. So at the time, there was this company called Turner Pictures, which controlled the Hanna-Barbera library. So he called over there, said, what would you guys think about a live action Scooby-Doo movie? They're like, well, how would you do that? Because this was pre-CGI. I mean, nobody knew how to do the darn dog. But I pitched it and they're like, all right, you're not an expensive writer, because I was young. We'll take a chance on this. And then while I was writing it, the Flintstones movie came out, and everybody's like, Dino, oh, anthropomorphic dog, that's how you do Scooby Doo. So I got the ball rolling on that. And then we finished the script, which you read, right? And everybody was happy with it. We were about to go out to directors when Warner Brothers bought Turner Pictures and had no interest in doing a Scooby Doo movie. We're like, and also when you buy something, you kind of like throw out all the old projects. So I kept hammering and hammering, and they're like, no. And everybody thought Scooby Doo had no value. They're like, nobody wants to see a Scooby Doo movie. Nobody cares about Scooby Doo. And we're like, are you kidding? I believe there was a time when people thought like that. And then they did this thing, it's called a Q score, where they take fake characters, whether it's Santa Claus or Bugs Bunny or Mickey Mouse, and see what the Q rating is. The higher the Q rating, the bigger. And so Warner Brothers did this thing. Of course, Mickey Mouse is number one. Number two was Scooby Doo. They're like, wait, what? Scooby Doo is valuable? So I'm like, oh, finally they're going to make my movie. But I wasn't available, and tones had changed, and there was a while where crazy story. So there was a while when Michael Myers was attached, and they wanted to do a version where, well, instead of a CGI dog, we'll have something happen the first 5 minutes where Scooby becomes a human and it's Michael Myers, or something like that. Or they were going to do Jim Carrey as Shaggy and Michael Myers as a human Scooby. I'm like, this sounds like a disaster. And they went down that road. I think they even had a script written. And then I still at this point wasn't available because I went on to other things. And then they found this young writer, James Gunn, who was young at the time, starting out, and basically gave him 2 weeks, I heard something like that, to write the script, because they had a production date, and he just kind of took some ideas from my thing and started from scratch. So that's why there's a big difference between these scripts. And then just setting the record straight entirely, they, at the time, Clerks was a huge movie, and that whole Kevin Smith vibe was around, you know, like risque and all that tone. So the Scooby-Doo script was sort of written and shot like that, to be like lots of drug jokes and sex jokes, and they had a screening where parents showed up with their kids, and the parents went crazy, like, how dare you, you can't do this to Scooby-Doo. And they're like, oh man, we made a mistake. So they had to go recut the film and take all that stuff out and make it a family movie. Because there's always been a rumor circulating that it was a rated R script, which it wasn't. It was PG-13, but it had drug and sex references and just adult stuff, like a Kevin Smith movie. Stuff that was they didn't have to do a lot of reshoots. They just cut the stuff out and made it a family film. So that was the story there. So that's the evolution. But I take pride in the fact that I'm the guy that got the ball rolling and took a stand. They're like, there needs to be a Scooby-Doo movie. And they're like, no, nobody wants to do this. And I just fought and fought. And they're like, all right, we'll try. And then boom, there we are.
It's amazing. And that really was kind of a triggering point for what's evolved with Scooby-Doo afterwards. Like, when I was seeing 2 Scooby-Doo movies every year, animated ones and stuff like that, it's completely rebuilt up again, and it's amazing. It really is. And I think it was really important to have a live action movie as well, because my parents don't like animated movies at all. So when I tried to watch cartoon Scooby, my mum would be like, oh, what have you put this on for? Whereas the second it was a live action one, it was like, okay, then I can tolerate this. Okay, I can do it now. Yeah. I can watch it. My next question for you was, I don't know if you've seen any of the more kind of up-to-date Scooby movies. There's one that came out really recently, well, relatively recently, called Scoob. And I know that Ming-Na Wen is currently working on the next one of those, which is The Holiday Haunt. I was just wondering if you'd had a chance to see the Scoob movies so far or anything like that.
I loved Scoob, because way back in the day, again, back when everybody thought I was crazy, after the Scooby-Doo was a hit, I pitched this idea, this is before Marvel, to my agent at the time, like, we should do kind of like the Hanna-Barbera version of the MCU. We should do a Blue Falcon Dynamite movie, and then we should do a this and a that. And he's like, you're crazy. Nobody has even heard of those things. Nobody cares. And then I saw Scoob come out, and it was kind of like, I mean, it's kind of like they jumped to the Avengers, you know, but seeing Captain Caveman and Blue Fat, I loved it. It was just like my childhood come true. Like, that's the movie that I always wanted to do back in the day when everybody said, "You're crazy." And it was delightful. I really liked it. And I think they got the tone right. One of my problems I have just as a fan watching this one, I don't think the director or James Gunn at the time quite got the heart and soul and tone of Scooby-Doo. I think they nailed it on the second one, Monsters.
Yeah.
I think also it was just such a rush job, and I think a lot of people in charge of Warner Brothers didn't understand Scooby-Doo at the time and didn't care. But I thought they really got it right on the second one, and got half right on the first one, I would say. But it's still fun. But I think the Scoob just nailed it. It was like 100% in the pocket. You know?
Scoob as well was one of the first cinematic releases they'd done since the 2004 movie as well. So I guess they kind of had a lot that they wanted to kind of maybe achieve with that movie. But going back to your original script, one thing that I know JayBee and I were reading through more or less simultaneously, and one thing we kept saying is we loved the kind of more original references of Scooby-Doo. Like you were saying how, you know, I feel like you said in 2002 maybe it was kind of less typical Scooby, whereas the original script that you did, we were reading it and we were just like, yes, this person seems to really care about Scooby. Like they must have been watching this growing up. It's something that seems quite close to their heart, because there's just so many things where we were picking up on, like, that sounds like how they'd speak, or, you know, that's something similar to what they'd have said in this cartoon, like this episode all those years ago. Like, yeah, it was so clear that you enjoyed that. Well, I'm presuming that you enjoyed Scooby growing up, because it really came through.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I love doing that. And that's what I mean by they don't quite get the tone. The love wasn't quite there. Like all that stuff went away, but all the references I put in was just because of love of Scooby-Doo, and you know, calling somebody the Hanna-Barberians. I think that was in one version. The Harlem Globetrotters showing up at the end, which was like such a crazy thing in Scooby-Doo that everybody remembers. But yeah, I tried to be respectful to that. I tried to be respectful to a lot of the images from the Scooby-Doo, even from the opening credits. I tried to I had a list of every shot in the opening credits of the Scooby-Doo animated show, and I tried to have every scene in the movie somewhere.
The mystery just seems so classical as well. Like I'm just thinking about how it started, and you know, those things like secret passageways and all this kind of thing, and you could almost imagine the intro where they're running up and down corridors and hallways and things, and it does just tie in so perfectly. It was honestly so good to read, and you could visualize it as well, because you can relate to these like iconic Scooby moments, that it was almost like just playing itself out in your head, and you weren't just reading the page, you could physically see it as well.
I worked hard on that and worked hard to do that. So I'm a little sad that my version never got to see the light of day, but such is life, and it warms my heart that 20 years later somebody read it and appreciates it. So thank you for that.
I think we were all so excited to read it. I know JayBee had sent it to me and was like, look what I got. And I think all of us just like instantly sat down and read. But throughout the script, we noted that you wrote all the characters with a lot of respect, like we were just talking about. It seems like you knew kind of the tone of Scooby, and you know what you like from Scooby, you want to implement it into it. But is there a member of Mr. Ink that you resonate with most?
I mean, for sure, Shaggy. I mean, he just makes. I'm probably in real life more like Fred, which I hate to admit. Or actually, I'm probably like Velma, because I'm like a nerdy reading brainiac. So I'm probably actually more like Velma. But I just love Shaggy, and I loved being able to create like their friendship and how they met and all of that stuff. So that was, yeah, and writing for that, and writing for Scooby was fun. Oh, there's a funny story. So when I was a kid, I always wanted to be a cartoonist for Hanna-Barbera. Like even as a kid, I had brand loyalty. I knew my Hanna-Barbera stuff, and I was always drawing the characters. When I signed up to do Scooby Doo, the producer's like, "You want to meet Joseph Barbera?" I'm like, yes, right? So we go over to the Hanna-Barbera offices, which no longer exist, but those offices were like walking into a giant cartoon. And I got to meet Joseph Barbera.
Wow.
And I actually brought my folder of night drawings when I was 9 to 11, and he signed that. And he also signed a book for me, but I was so starstruck. Like, give me any actor and I'm normal, but for whatever reason around Joseph Barbera, I couldn't talk. And he's like, "Well, you're getting ready to write this movie. Do you have any questions for me?" And it was the most embarrassing moment of my life. All I could think of, because I just started writing, and when I was writing, I'm like, is there an, how do you spell it? Is it Zoinks or Zoiks? Is there an N, or do we just think we hear the N? So anyway, so he's like, "You have any questions?" I'm like, is there an N in Zoinks? He's like, "Yes." And I was so red, and the producers are like, "Oh my God." But they were laughing at it afterwards. I'm like, I panicked. I know what else it was on my mind. I was scared. But that was what I meant. And he must have, I think he thought it was endearing. I was sweating. They're like, you act like you just met like Sylvester Stallone or the president or something. I'm like, I did. It's like the biggest influence of my childhood.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
Yeah, true story.
And I think it's really safe to say, because, you know, your love for Scooby as a fan and as like just writing scripts and stuff, it really did show when we were reading through. And I've kind of been training to be an actress for the past like 2 years or so. So I usually read through scripts and scenes and I'm like, okay, so I've got to do this, that, and the other. But I got so lost in the actual story. I didn't read it as a normal script. I was like envisioning everything that was going on, and it was just magical to read.
Oh.
And so on the subject of the scripts and everything, the date on the earliest draft that we could find was dated the 16th of February 1996. Do you recall if this is the date that you began writing the screenplay or the date that it was finished?
The date that was finished. It took me, is that the one that has Goober and the Ghost Chasers in the beginning? There was a draft that had that.
I think that's the one that ended with the kind of ritual kind of monster when Shaggy and Scooby are in the dresses and the monster's like, it's been a long time, but not that long, like that type of ending, which I think was altered in the next version.
I think I'm not even quite sure how you guys got that one, because that was like an early rough draft. It must have just got out there somehow. But then my manager sent you the last draft I wrote, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the one that was a little more polished, because that first one was kind of rough and just working out ideas and everything, kind of messy in places. I should, man, because it was written so long ago, I'm sure I'm a much better writer now. I'd like to reread that myself and see if I cringe or if I like it. But it makes my day that you like it, and I feel like even though people didn't get to see the movie, at least the four of you got to see it in your head. So I feel like vindicated there that you like it.
Honestly, I'm kind of thinking like there was, you know, like I want to say the most recent Harry Potter book, The Cursed Child, was just a script published in a book. I'd be happy with that. Get like, you know, just having the Scooby story as a script in a book.
Although even then, I think
Scooby
is a franchise that doesn't shy away from revisiting kind of old ideas, like the Curse of the, well, like the 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo was a cancelled series, and then recently they've done a movie about that. And I'm just kind of like, if they could use your script as a framework for the next animated, you know, feature, I think that would be such a magical experience. Because like you were saying with Scoob, I was reading it and I was like, okay, so there's Speed Buggy outside there, there's the Pussycats kind of playing music. I was like, I kind of feel like this is the Scoob that I wanted to see, where it was a bit more like starting the cinematic universe with Iron Man as opposed to the Avengers.
Well, maybe all the Scooby fans can do a write-in campaign. But I did.
Yeah.
You said something that is not unreasonable, which is, you know, now I have a lot more cred as a writer and I'm more well known. At the very least, I should say, can I have that back just to turn into a graphic novel or something like that? So it exists in some form for people to see. then you don't have to, you know, you might have your own plan for all the movies and everything, and this may not fit into it. But can I, you know, sort of the Scooby-Doo movie you never got to see and turn into a graphic novel, which there are people that do that. So
That'd be cool.
maybe I'll look into that. That could be fun.
That would be amazing.
I will put that on my list of things to do.
Absolutely. And I guess my next question from there, and it's kind of an obvious one, but first of all, I want to say that reading that initial script, I was almost trying to like figure you out before the interview, but I was going through so many, like I was almost putting my little detective cap on. I was like, okay, it's set in New England and it's kind of spooky. Is this like, do they like Stephen King? And then you made a reference to Jack Nicholson in The Shining. And then you then mentioned Cujo, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm getting like a lot of personality from even this script alone. And I just thought that it was absolutely wonderful how you managed to bring in so many references and kind of ways that I could visualize the story, even with it just, you know, being in a writing format. You know, I couldn't visualize it in terms of a screen, but just the imagination there was incredible. And I think we've touched upon this, but am I right in saying that this was intended to be live action as opposed to an animated feature?
Yeah, it was 100% live action. That's how I pitched it, and figuring out how, I think I wrote some scenes with Scooby that were probably unfilmable at the time. So I think if that went in production, it'd have to like change some of those scenes. But then again, I look at the movie and they had some crazy stuff with CGI Scooby. I mean, it's, you know, it's early primitive CGI, clearly. But yeah, it was always written to be live action. I wanted to write it just like a movie and not make it feel kiddie, but make it feel like a real mystery and real themes, which is, you know, the theme of that movie was all about facing your fear. I mean, I think there's a scene where all their fears come to life. I wanted it to be something you could relate to thematically and just relate to if you grew up with Scooby-Doo with all the little Easter eggs. And then if you'd never seen Scooby-Doo before, to watch it and become a fan afterwards.
100%. And I guess more on what we were saying in terms of revising or revisiting the story that you've crafted. Of course, the primary setting for the script that we got was at Elias Kingston University, which is actually a setting that was used in Be Cool Scooby-Doo a couple of years ago. And I was wondering if you were aware of that or if you'd seen that series at all.
I have not seen it. I wasn't aware, but I would assume they got that from my script. I'm trying to remember if I made up Kingston University, because Elias Kingston was, like, you know, one of the people in the original animated show, Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? But yeah, maybe they took it from there.
It certainly does lend itself really well to the plot, and having that been the ghost and everything. I mean, it is an amazing location, and the things that you did with it and the characterizations that came from it as well were amazing. When you were writing this script, did you have any actors in mind that you thought suited the roles particularly well that you were writing?
I actually didn't, because I just had the animated characters in mind. Yeah, so I really didn't. But I think they nailed it casting wise when they eventually did cast it. I mean, Matthew Lillard was a surprise to everybody, just how brilliant he was, how he could channel that character. But yeah, when I wrote it, I kind of just had the animated characters in mind, just trying to capture their voices that I remember so well from the show.
That's great, and I agree with what you're saying as well. Like, Matthew Lillard turned out to be an amazing Shaggy, and then to go on and do the voiceovers for the cartoons as well and the animated things, it was just amazingly done. And in regards to Scooby, I know we kind of said it was really early for CGI and things, but there's one scene where in the script where Scooby would be locked up with other dogs, that the dog kind of like, did you have anything in your mind of how that was going to look, if there was going to be real dogs other than Scooby who was going to be CGI'd? Did you kind of have any vision of how this could turn out to happen?
Yeah, we talked a lot about that scene, because they're like, is it weird to see a clearly CGI dog next to other dogs? Like, let's just play into the weirdness where they're looking at him and he's looking at them, and like, and just let's just have fun with it and not make a statement either way, and just have just the absurdity of a CGI dog with real dogs and acting like we don't know the difference. So I think we were just whether it would have worked when they filmed it, I don't. It might have got to that film like, this is just too weird, cut the scene. But at least in my head, it was funny because it was just, I don't know, just the absurdity of that. Where
it kind of reminds me of something that they did in 2010 when they did the third live action movie, because that is a scene where Scooby is getting adopted from this pet fair day, I think. And so he's kind of like the main dog on show. So he's got this like space to himself, but there's lots of other dogs around him in little boxes and cages, and they're all, you know, quite obviously not CGI'd in. And then he's just stood there in the middle, and I feel like they tried to do that then, and it worked out quite well. So I think that would have been really good to see.
I need to see that one. I have not seen that one. You've inspired me to like catch up on all my Scooby Doos that I've missed over the years.
Well, and even at the very beginning of the second film, Scooby talks to real dogs for a second. So, you know, I think they kind of threw that in as well.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that.
So we had kind of already talked about this a handful of times, but where your script kind of references a bunch of different Hanna-Barbera properties. But was this your idea of intending to start a cinematic Hanna-Barbera universe, or was it just purely for Easter eggs?
At the time, it was purely for Easter eggs at the time, because I don't think anybody was thinking cinematic universe. That's a relatively new thing.
Right.
But I said after the movie came out, I did go to my agent and say, we should do a Blue Falcon movie, and then a Captain Caveman movie, and what was the other one? A Hong Kong Phooey movie, and then throw them all together in one movie. And he just looked at me like I was nuts. Well, actually, he was my agent, but now he actually was an executive at Warner Brothers. So I was actually pitching to him as a person who controlled all the property. And he's like, people know who Scooby Doo is. Nobody cares about Captain Caveman and Blue Falcon. And maybe they don't. I mean, if you did a Captain Caveman live action movie, would people go see it? But I had a great take for a live action Hong Kong Phooey movie, which was to ignore the whole dog of it all and tell the story of Jackie Chan, basically, is a janitor at the police station and finds this magic book, and Spot, the little cat, Spot would just be this little kid from the streets that hangs out with him. And so it had written a whole treatment for a Hong Kong Phooey movie where it was all humans. It was just Jackie Chan is a janitor who finds this book of Kung Fu and gets these Kung Fu powers and has a little Kung Fu mobile and the Phooey mobile and everything. And I actually wrote like a treatment for that, which I thought was pretty funny. But again, I think I was ahead of my time. Everybody looked at me like I was insane. Like, get out of my office. Why do you keep bringing us all this like 70s cartoon stuff? But now it's all hip again. So I should dig these things out and have the last laugh.
Well,
I think we definitely need to see your adaptions.
Right? That's what I was, yeah.
I'll send you my silly Hong Kong Phooey treatment if I can find it.
That would be amazing. Thank you so much.
I mean, let me read it first. It might be ridiculous, but I remember having fun writing it.
It's kind of funny. You brought up Hong Kong Phooey. There's somewhere out in the internet, they were trying to do like a live action Hong Kong Phooey, and some of the like test footage had leaked at one point. And it looks freaky. Like, I don't think they did very good with how he looks, but it never obviously got picked up or anything. Never went anywhere, but.
And he was, they had him as a CGI dog, Hong Kong Phooey?
Yeah, he was a CGI dog, but he looked freaky. That's all I gotta say.
It'd be hard to pull that one off. For sure.
So, sorry, I lost where we were for a second. Oh, well, you've already actually told us if you've seen The Mystery Begins, and you have not. So we'd love to hear your thoughts if you do ever watch that one.
For sure watch that.
when you like when and if you get a chance to watch it, you'll have to like come back on and tell us all about what you think and things that you may have like implemented from like your original scripts and stuff. I think that would be interesting.
Yeah, I will, because it's so funny, because Warner Brothers owns my script, right? I mean, and I every once in a while, like, I'll see pieces of that show up, or at least I think they're pieces of that, but it just could be coincidence. So, and I know this third live action movie was when they were older and sort of broken up and got back together, or no, it was the origin story, right?
Yeah.
Which was what I had written. I had written an origin story. I remember we went back and forth. I wrote several treatments before I wrote the script, and it went back and forth between, is this going to be an origin story or a story where they break up and get back together? It was just for drama. It was going to be one of the two, because you didn't want them all together and happy and no conflict. And then I think when James Gunn took over, the producer had decided at that point to go back to like the original thing that I had done, which was having them together and then calling it quits and going their separate ways. But I always liked the origin story, because I just always wondered, how did these crazy people find each other? And like, it seems we're just knowing high school, right? Like, how is this like guy like Fred hanging out with a guy like Shaggy? How did that happen? You know? And then that's one thing I did. I just upped their age to college from high school, which I don't know, maybe it could have been high school as well. But you know, it was before Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I'd probably like put them in high school if I was redoing it.
Oh, wow. And you know, you briefly mentioned this earlier on, but to what extent of the script and story from your script was used when crafting the James Gunn screenplay? And there's quite a lot of elements that seem to have remained. And one that we like really noticed was Candy is very similar to Mary Jane in the Demon Cults.
Yeah, I to this day I don't know if he read my script and started over, or it was the same producer. So I'm sure there was like a lot of like, they loved the idea of Shaggy having a girlfriend, and you can definitely tell the tone. Like, I named her Candy, haha, because they like to eat, and they named her Mary Jane, haha, because they're going for the drug reference, right? And then the whole idea of them being split or getting back together. But there are definitely things I recognize, and quite honestly, I don't know why they started from scratch and just didn't have him sort of rewrite the script I had written. A little bit, because that happens in Hollywood. They inherited the script from another studio they bought, and so executives like to not get credit. So they're like, I developed this, as opposed to I inherited this and it became a hit. So there's probably a little bit of that going on the Warner Brothers side of things. So yeah, to this day, I do not know if he had read my script. Clearly, again, same producer, so he was getting some ideas from the script I had written through them, I would assume. Don't even know that for sure. But yeah, so much time had passed between when I wrote it and when it got made.
That's interesting. And I guess all of us will have like go and look even more and do like a watch through and compare directly to your screenplay of it.
Yeah.
And when you completed the second draft, a lot of the elements involving especially the demon cult, it was removed. And do you remember why that decision was made overall?
I think everybody thought it was a little too, well, one, expensive, because I think with the demon stuff, and yeah, I don't really remember, other than maybe I think the producers just didn't like it, like wanted to keep it more fun, and it got too serious with that. Maybe I don't recall. I could probably dig through my notes that I would get from them.
Well, thank you so much. I mean, it is incredible. And a question that I've got is, and you've kind of briefly touched upon this, but it's the fact that you were given story credits for the 2002 movie that did come out. But what exactly did this entail? As in, were you on the set at all? Like, was it a hands-on, or almost like the new cheaper by the dozen? Was it that you'd pitched the idea in the past and so therefore you were credited in the 2002 movie to that extent?
Yeah. The way that happens, because I wasn't involved in making the Scooby Doo movie. I mean, my claim to fame is I'm the one that got the ball rolling so that there actually became a Scooby Doo movie that exists. But what happens when a movie is done, the Writers Guild, which is the guild that represents all writers, gets to determine credits, and the way they do that is Warner Brothers producers have to submit every draft. So they would submit everything that's written, like my 2 outlines, my 2 drafts, and then James Gunn's draft. And then they get 3 anonymous Writer Guild writers, because they figure we writers understand writing more than anybody. And these 3 writers read everything and determine what the credit should be. Because the studio, if they got determined credits, it'd be like the person they like the most or their friend or anybody, right? So that's why the Writers Guild is in charge. So they read all the material and determined that half the story was mine, which is why I got half story credit. Half the story was mine, which is sort of the DNA of the movie, but then the script was clearly James Gunn, because he didn't take any scenes and or dialogue, just story ideas like Shaggy having a girlfriend and the team being pulled apart and getting back together, and the story elements as opposed to screenplay elements.
That's really
That's how
interesting.
that
Thank
works.
you.
It's not very fun. It's all very lawyery and clinical at that point, credit determination. But for every movie you see, that's how it happens. And every writer has to write a statement saying why you think you deserve credit and the other people don't. And just
That's
money's at
amazing.
stake. Residuals are all based on credits.
That's great. Thank you. And of the work that you saw and the writing on the build up to that movie, be it from your script or if you got to see the James Gunn script, was there any concepts that stand out to you as something you would have liked to have seen, translated into a scene that was either removed or something that you particularly liked in your script that wasn't translated over that stands out to you?
Yeah, I mean they're so different. My script and then the James Gunn script that got made. I mean, I'm glad they kept Shaggy having a girlfriend, because I thought that was an interesting element. That's something new that didn't exist in the animated shows, really. But yeah, it's almost like, well, I wish they just would have made my version. But it's life in Hollywood.
That's amazing. Thank you. And I think you've answered my next question as well, so Smash, I'll let you ask yours.
So then, seeing what actually came out, what was your opinion on the casting for the film?
Casting I thought was perfect. I mean, couldn't have done better. I was a little Freddie Prinze back in, he's kind of has a reputation of sort of being not very emotional, so I was like, well, that's a weird choice, but I thought he had good chemistry, probably because he was dating Sarah Jessica Parker, so that gave some chemistry. Velma was amazing, and Matthew Lillard was amazing, and Scooby was amazing. I thought he did a great job. But yeah, I mean, I think the cast in a lot of ways, for me, saved the movie, because I was sort of disappointed in some of the story choices and some of missing the tone. But I did overall enjoy it. But I thought the casting just made it
Right.
I mean, if they had a horrible cast, I don't know if we'd be talking about that movie right now.
Yeah.
Maybe, but they were so good, so good.
Oh yes, we all love the casting as well. I think it's one of the most talked about castings of Scooby-Doo history. Which even a little fun fact, Linda Cardellini, who did Velma, came back later in a Scooby animated series. She didn't play Velma, but got to be in more Scooby, so that was fun. And then obviously Matthew Lillard took over as Shaggy, so it's great. So your screenplay was a little more intended for a mature audience, but after what ended up coming out, was cut because of the negative response.
Yeah, that wasn't that was the James Gunn script. That was
okay.
for a more mature audience. Mine was always a family film.
Okay, perfect.
Sorry.
No, you're good.
So I've had, like, today my brain, it functions and then it just goes blank for a second.
As does mine.
So I was wondering, what are some of your favorite moments from working on the movie?
I mean, I think for me, it was like when I first got hired to write the movie, it gave me an excuse where I just had to go sit on my couch and rewatch all the because I wanted to basically be true to the first 2 seasons of Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? The first 2 original seasons. And then throw in, like, from the Scooby-Doo movies, the crazy guest star, which is the Harlem Globetrotter showing up. And then, you know, nobody likes Shaggy, so I saw in my draft. Well, that's a common story element from my draft and theirs. Like, we didn't like Shaggy, or I'm sorry, Scrappy. Did I say Shaggy? We didn't like Scrappy, and so they made Scrappy the ultimate bad guy in the movie. And I just had a scene where riffing on the credits when they introduced Scrappy to the world, when he, like, his box with him falls out of a train or whatever. He's like, puppy power, and then I had him run over him, which is probably mean, but that's how much I love Scrappy.
That's amazing. And there's just been so many, like, it's just continued throughout Scooby-Doo that, like, Scrappy just doesn't get mentioned anymore. Like, I don't know if you're familiar with this series, the 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo, but when they remade that into a movie and called it The Curse of the 13th Ghost, Scrappy was an integral part of the series. But, like, when it came around to the movie, Velma turned around and was like, what's a Scrappy? And everyone's like, yeah, we don't talk about that. No.
Oh, that's funny. I think they're trying to, like, rehabilitate Scrappy to make him likable, because he was the Jar Jar of my generation. Like, when he showed up in the new Scooby-Doo series, like, what? Why do we have this, like, annoying little guy running around like, let me out, let me out? So you know, when I was a kid, we all hated Scrappy Doo, and then I think he just became the punching bag. Now it becomes fun to hate Scrappy Doo. But I feel bad for him now. I mean, he should get his shot to, like, redeem himself for the world, the way Jar Jar did a little bit in the Clone Wars animated series. You know, give him another shot, people.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, it would be fun to see Scrappy and what they can do with their character now. And I guess a little bit on that, you know, this, you know, it's incredible that you started working on this movie, and, you know, 20 years later we're still sat talking about how it transferred into a live action movie and everything, and, you know, people still love that. But my question for you would be, would you be interested in working on another Scooby movie, writing a script? Because, like we say, we now have, like, they come out, like, kind of 2 a year, so they are quite frequent. So I guess just if you'd like to write another one, and if there is any characters like Scrappy that you'd like to see again.
Yeah, that's a good question. My agents, it was about a year ago, said, you know, they're going to make a Scooby-Doo TV series, live action Scooby-Doo TV series. Would you like to talk to them? I'm like, I don't know. I've been there, done that. I don't know if I have any fresh ideas, but I had the phone call, right? Trying to get myself excited because, oh, back into Scooby-Doo, finally, you know, I can do things. I could tell during the call that my heart wasn't into it. So I guess I feel like I did my thing, and now I'm just going to be a fan. And I've moved on to other things. I have so many projects now that really excite me. It would kind of like be taking a step backwards. But the only thing that would get me excited is if I got a call someday and they're just like, hey, we decided we're going to shoot your movie, whether it's an animated version or a straight to HBO Max version, or, like I said, even we're going to turn it into a graphic novel. That would please me, because I was happy with it, and I wish people got to see it. So I think that's about the only thing that would make me, like, get back in the Scooby world, other than being a fan.
Yeah, that would be amazing. And I think the script that you wrote would lend itself to being a cartoon as well. Like it starts off with that iconic kind of scene where they're like layering up food and all that kind of thing that just works really well with a cartoon as well. So it would be great to see it in either kind of format. I think my last question that I have for you is, you know, you said like continuing as more of a fan of Scooby-Doo. Is there a particular actor or actress that you would like to see fill a part of Scooby, either as one of the main gang or just as a feature?
Wow, that's a very good question. And my answer is, gosh, I don't know. I mean, I'm so in, but yeah, they're good because everybody's older now. They're going to have a whole new cast, right? And I'm trying to think if there's anybody out there I've seen that would be like a great reboot cast. So I'm sorry, I don't have an answer off the top of my head.
No, I mean that's absolutely.
I just want to be surprised, like I was the first time. Like, oh, they found some great people.
I mean, a part of me rewatching Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. was a bit like, could Elizabeth Henstridge be Velma? And I was like, yeah, probably an imagined take on that kind of brainy scientist would be absolutely incredible for them personally.
Yeah, she's definitely got some Velma in her, or Gemma Simmons had some Velma in her, for sure.
Mm-hmm. I think our last question is just asking what's next for you.
I got a lot of things lined up that are all pretty cool. Unfortunately, I'm not allowed to talk about any of them just yet. But some of them are literally like weeks away from announcements, I think. But something else that's sort of back in the Marvel world a little bit, Marvel adjacent, not officially a Marvel thing, but related. About all I can say. And another sort of book that's kind of like a new, you know, like Harry Potter, the Percy Jacksons. This is like the new thing. I'm really excited about, which I'm developing, and a couple feature things. So a lot of fun stuff. I've just been sort of stockpiling, getting everything ready, and now it's sort of the time where we release them into the world and see what happens. So should be some fun things, I hope.
That's amazing, and we're really looking forward to them. And as well, any kind of social media links where you can, where the people listening to this can kind of stay up to date with things going on, and you know, things to be watching and looking out for, will all be in the description below. So if anybody would like to check that out, then like we say, they will be in the description. Did anybody else have any other questions?
No, I think that's absolutely amazing. I guess would like to thank you so much for the time that you've given us today.
Thank you. You made my day and my week. I really appreciate it. This was fun. Thank you so much. And nice to meet you all.
You as well. Thank you so much for your time today. It's been absolutely incredible to speak with you. So again, thank you so much for your time. And thank you as well to everybody listening. This is part of a series that we do. There'll be lots of other interviews going out on the channel. So if you'd like those, then subscribe for that. And all the links for the other social medias will be in the description below as well. So thank you.